Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Product Uncensored show. This is episode 48, and my name is Colin Pell. I'm your host. Today, we have a super OG guest on the show. And I'll just tell you exactly how OG this guest is by spitting out her incredibly impressive CV, right? She is Harvard educated. She worked at Amazon during the Jeff Bezos era. She worked at Yahoo right before Marissa Mayer actually joined. If I'm getting my facts correct, she was the VP of product at Viki. She was the former CPTO at the Parent Inc., which is the largest content community commerce platform for parents in Southeast Asia. And she is currently now the principal lecturer and consultant at NUS-ISS. Now, how is that for stacked, right? So please let me welcome to the show Nadine Yap. Hi, Nadine.
Hey there.
Yes, it is really good to see you again. For those of you who wonder why she looks so familiar, it is because she was also a panelist at the recent FuseCon conference in KL, which was a really huge conference, I might add. The biggest one I've been to this side of the world, in Malaysia, that is, for those of you who are wondering which side of the world that is. And I was telling her, right, that I needed to get her on the panel, and I also needed to get her on this show. So now I can comfortably say that I have kept my promise to do both. So yes, Nadine, I hope you are ready for a conversation to chit chat a lot about your experience in product management and all things related to product.
Absolutely.
Okay, nice. So let's start with, if I were to ask you, Nadine, what is the 30-second elevator pitch for Nadine Yap? How would you say it? How would you describe yourself in 30 seconds?
Elevator pitch. Damn. Hmm. Constantly curious. Uh, love to mentor. Um, yeah, those are two things. And I love to build.
You love to build. Very nice, very nice. Okay. So before we go any further, I'm very curious about your background, right? And this is something actually I wanted to ask you even when we met, and I keep forgetting. Are you native to Singapore or did you move to Singapore?
Born in Singapore. My dad's Chinese Singaporean. My mother's German, but she moved to Singapore in 1967. So
Wow.
I went to local schools. I only left Singapore to go to the US, went to Harvard um, after I finished all my A levels.
Okay, okay. And so I guess my question to you is, right, you studied in Harvard, and you worked in Amazon, in the US. What made you decide to come back?
Uh, well, two reasons. One, I had a kid, and after about a year and a half, I think we decided to bring up the family in Asia. Firstly, because I wanted to bring up the family around, uh, bring up the kids around my extended family who are quite close. We also felt that sort of Asia was just a more positive, growing, and interesting space. And I now have two daughters, a little safer in Singapore to bring up kids. But secondly, it also feels like, coming to Singapore, one of the reasons I was keen on going to the US, aside from the many things I could learn, was kind of the level of anonymity and the ability to sort of try and experiment things. But then you are in kind of a really large and empty space, and it's I feel like coming back to Singapore, coming back to Asia, having learned what I've learned in the US in a very interesting time. There were things that I could bring back into Asia, and to the home area, that could hopefully be a value add.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, and really appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit more about the personal side of your life. So, really appreciate that openness as well. I will definitely come back to the point around you coming back to Asia, right? But for now, let's start with education. You went to Harvard and you studied something that was very far away from science, I believe.
Yep, I studied sociology. It was either between sociology or psychology. I've always been interested in why people do things, how people operate in groups. And then I did a master's in East Asian Studies, where I did an internship at the Institute of Policy Studies. So I was thinking of moving into, international governance, like international organizations like the WHO or places like that. But I happened to graduate right around the time of the dot com boom. And I had friends who said, before you disappear to wherever you're going to disappear, hey, the startup we're working at needs some help with marketing research. I said, social scientist, sure, I can do marketing research. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey into the tech space. And while I was there, we didn't have an IT budget. So the customer service manager and myself needed to create some interactive tools for the guys answering the telephones to use. So we taught ourselves how to code. And so from that time onwards, my next few job was as software engineer.
Wow. So you taught yourself to code. That is
Yes.
massively okay. This definitely is a must ask question. What was your first programming language that you learned?
Pearl, very easy.
Oh wow, Perl. Bang.
Pearl, yeah, yeah, that dates us, right? Pearl, and of course HTML. It was pre-CSS, and all of that. That all began to sort of start coming into play a few years later.
Nice, nice. And that at that time, right? Like what did you do to learn? So this the part I'm very curious, right? Because at that time, you didn't have like, I think what, YouTube wasn't around then.
Nope, no YouTube. It was
Yeah.
all Unix RTFM,
Wow.
and asking people and trial and error.
I must say that you have my utmost respect. Anyone who can learn
Oh, and
coding by themselves, yeah.
O'Reilly books were really helpful as well.
Well, okay. To be fair, O'Reilly books are still very relevant today, in my opinion. In my
Yeah, yeah.
very limited knowledge opinion, I think it's still very valid. So yes, I think that is one of the good things that has survived the dot-com boom, the internet boom, the global financial crisis, and everything else. And long may O'Reilly live. So yay.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah. Okay. So did you ever think that just before we go into your time at Amazon, right? Did you ever think that marketing research role would be like a temporary thing, and then you imagined that you would go into academia, or was it always your goal to like be as adventurous as possible, right? Because I guess what I'm trying to understand was your journey into product was kind of accidental, if I may say so. Um, and I'm trying to like, was it accidental because you just so happened to be working in that market research company, or was it because you were looking out for other opportunities, or it was just whatever that was there?
It truly was. It truly was accidental, but also didn't really have a very solid plan of action to. Okay, I'm going to. I definitely want to sort of head towards these types of organizations. And so once I had started, um, you know, one friend from the same company went to Yahoo. Another friend from the same company went to Microsoft. So we were kind of just all in this space where all of this was bubbling and happening around us at the time. Um, and it was just really interesting to learn how to code. So once I had dived in, I really wasn't thinking about, okay, now it's time to. I've spent enough time doing my marketing research stint. I think it's time for me to go back into the international governance world, right? I mean, it was just all really interesting.
And this was around like what, 99, was it?
Yep, late 90s, starting
Late
from
90s.
end of 95. Yeah,
Okay.
so I
Okay.
did I did three startups before the third startup was bought by Amazon. Like dot-com boom craziness, right? We launched in February and we were bought for 200 million in April.
Okay, okay. So that was actually going to be one of my next questions, right? What was the temperature? What was the scene like in Boston at that time? Because I mean, it's one thing to talk about the boom from few thousand miles away, being in Asia and all that, but you were literally right there when it was happening, right? Can you like explain a little bit, like was it like all it's made out to be, like what you see on Social Network, the movie, and and things like that? Like, what was it like?
Well, so the nature of cities are very different. I mean, what you see, in that movie was a very Silicon Valley uh, mindset. Uh, Boston is a little bit more. Um, there's a little bit more old school stuff going on there still. Academia is really strong there, but at the same time, it's always kind of churned out some interesting technology over time, especially kind of baseline technology. But all this interesting stuff was going on. Bill Gates also like dropped out of Harvard and founded Microsoft. So all that stuff was going on, and the internet was moving so fast and enabling things. It felt very much like things were were democratizing. Um, we could do things that otherwise, we would have had to found a company like Microsoft to distribute all this kind of software or join a media company, whereas the internet is here and we could create stuff and make it available right away. So that was super interesting. And because we hadn't gone through the first amazing .com boom and bust yet, um, we hadn't had that sort of perspective. Things were just growing and growing and growing, and were seeing some. We were already seeing kind of the Microsoft millionaire kind of scenario growing, but there was definitely a lot of possibility. At the same time, um, like between that small group of us, who we were all from the same we knew each other from uni, at that same company. One of us went to a company that was bought by Yahoo, and because that company, I think, was a lot more equitable in handing out their shares. Um, Even another friend of ours who had just graduated uni had just joined the company. Um, when it got bought by Yahoo, was able to take that money and buy property in Palo Alto with two houses on that property. Um, yes. Yeah, I didn't get quite that much. And then the other friend of mine joined startup companies that sort of, didn't manage to make that sort of .com boom uh, payout, if you will. So, luck of the draw sometimes. And it was just really crazy. And then at the same time, those of us who had sort of profited and done really well, then the .com bust happened.
Mm,
So we felt, felt the same thing multiple times over the years with the financial crisis, with this current kind of funding winter. I'm like, well, feels the same. At some point, things will pick up, and who knows what it will look like at that point. But it was very exciting, and
mm.
we
Yeah.
really didn't
So
know what we'd create.
yeah. So another question, right? You mentioned Bill Gates. He was also at Harvard. Was he your senior, junior, or contemporary?
Oh, he was senior, definitely.
Okay.
Microsoft was already underway. In fact, that person that joined the company and that it got bought, he had been doing an internship at Microsoft already.
Right, right. Okay, okay. Nice. So did the story of Bill Gates, dropping out of Harvard, founding Microsoft, was that something that it was that like the, I won't say urban legend, but was that the legend in Harvard at the time that you were in? Like, was everybody trying to do that?
I wouldn't say everybody was trying to do that, but I mean, it was definitely, huh, can be done. Interesting.
Okay, so
Um,
suddenly it was like possibilities are there.
yeah. And of
Uh,
course, Mark Zuckerberg was my junior. He did the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is like the OG of the OG. Like Nadine is giving you all like the lowdown, like being right there, right? So okay. Let's move on.
But
Let's
like,
move on. Yeah, sorry.
so I mean, interestingly, it, it was just random. Even though I was a sociology major, um, when I always worked somewhat when I was in college, and so my 1 year they had installed WAN in all the dorms. And so when people were starting to move in the dorms, my friend was like, "Hey, the guys who are at the computer help desk, they need help going out and going to everybody in the dorms and helping them to install these like cards so that they can plug into the WAN. You want to join?" So I said, "Okay." And so from then on, I mean, as a CCA, I worked in the computer help desk downstairs at the science center, right? Like it's just random, the random way my life ends up working.
Yeah. I mean, it. I mean, I there are like 5,000 questions going through my head at the moment, and at the same time I'm also trying to live vicariously in a way, right? Thinking about like what would we be like if you were in a studied in the uni where Bill Gates was your senior and Mark Zuckerberg was your junior, and it was like this whole boom time, right? It's yeah, I just I can't imagine it. Like I feel like I cannot fully appreciate it. Like, but yeah, I'm guessing it would have been really something, right? So
Yes,
mm,
lots of interesting stuff always going on. Kind of intimidating, also can be, but lots
okay.
of opportunities as well.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Speaking of opportunities, let's talk about how you ended up at Amazon, right? So I think you alluded to it a little earlier, where I think the marketing research company that you were in got bought over by Amazon, right? Did I get
Yeah.
that correct?
Okay, so this by now I'd moved on to a third company. This company, what it did was um, they went into this wanting to get bought by Amazon. The co-founders were in the music industry, and the problem statement was, "Hey, it's really hard to figure out what's out there in the market in terms of used and rare music that's available to be bought. You either had to go into these secondhand music stores, or you had to find these uh, like catalogs that was small, smudgy print on like really flimsy paper and like comb through everything. So why don't we get all of that stuff online, get all the various vendors and used and music people online? We created an auction feature, we created a fixed price feature, we created a discussion board. We launched with about, if I remember right, 3 million items in the catalog, with quite a few kind of well-known vendors as well. And Amazon bought us because they were exactly going into the third-party merchant space, and they wanted the vendors, they wanted the inventory, and it was a bit of an acqui-hire where they wanted people who had worked, built stuff in this space to come on board and help them build the space.
And now I'm very curious. At that time in your third company, right? Were you still doing research? Like, what was your role at that company?
I was a front end engineer.
Okay, so
That
by that
time
time
I
you.
was, yeah, I was ASP at that point.
Oh wow, ASP as well. Okay, very nice, very nice. Okay, so question at that point in time, and this is where I sort of want. This is where I find your stories are so interesting, right? Because a lot of the guests I have on the show are like they came much later. So it was when like product management was like there already, right? Whereas you were in at this time where like what this was still late 90s, right?
Yep, it was
Which
program
means
management, project management at the time. If you were a
exactly.
product manager, you were still very much kind of on the brand management side of
Yes,
things.
correct, correct. So yeah, so this is where I wanted to really understand a little bit more. Like this predates like the Agile Manifesto. This like predates before Marty
Yep,
Kagan became like a
yep,
household name, right? And
yes.
at that company where you were working as that front end developer, and that problem statement that was shared, how did you guys build and ship? Like, back then I mean, Scrum wasn't popular. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So how did you guys work?
So like it was literally very small company. We literally wanted to build fast, build kind of auctions functionality, discussion board functionality. That stuff was already out there. So we just wanted to build something really quickly and get stuff online really fast. So that's why we picked ASP and Java. And we basically got into a room and storyboarded the whole company, storyboarded it out and just sat down, banged it out. And I was in charge of getting all the inventory uploaded properly. And then we launched. Um, we didn't even really necessarily have to demonstrate a lot of traction, but because we already had all the the known kind of used and rare music vendors, at least on the East Coast, a lot of the indie record labels and people like that, they were already on board. That was the value add for Amazon. So it was built with an exit strategy in mind.
Okay. Few questions there. So first question was, it doesn't sound like what your team and what the company was doing would fall under the waterfall umbrella, right?
No, it was very MVP.
Mm, yeah.
um, yeah, and it was partly MVP because it was like build fast, get bought. Um, so kind of MVP a little bit by accident.
So do you feel like what you were doing back then and what is happening now with, Agile and Scrum and Kanban and whatnot being all the rage? Do you find that there are a lot of similarities, or is it very different?
Okay, so once I got to Amazon, then I folded into the marketplace team. That time, the third party merchant inventory was sold on auctions.amazon.com and then zshops.amazon.com, not on www.amazon.com.
Right.
So at that point, I had program managers, and we began to sort of adopt more of a waterfall style, or whatever they had been doing there. I then uh, decided that I was always capable and like interested in getting involved with the stakeholders in what we were building and why we were building it. So I moved into program management, where I then moved into a different group. It was called the community group, where I was the product manager or program manager at the time of the customer reviews, the wish lists. Later on, it was the wedding registry, the baby registries. In our groups, we owned the gift certificates for some reason. So a bunch of like random things that had to do with kind of third party uh, um, users connecting with other users, in other words. Um, so I remember then working with my engineering manager, trying to persuade our senior management to adopt XP, extreme programming, which is a similar kind of a precursor to Agile.
Yes.
And yes, and then not too long after that, Jeff Bezos himself kind of moved us into this whole two pizza team experiment, which very much lends itself to Agile.
Mm, mm. Okay, okay. So for you, right? Yeah, because the original question, the original reason why I asked that question is because one of the things that I found interesting throughout my experience working in tech companies is that, not all companies planned to be agile, but some of them already embodied the some of the tenets, or they had principles that would work that way. So for example, like when you said, right, the goal was to be very MVP, to build something really quickly, launch it. These are actually very core principles to how you want to sort of build fast, get to market fast, get feedback, iterate, etc., etc. So they're like the building blocks there. So that was why I was asking that original question, because some people feel like, the way some people would talk about agile these days, you would feel like it was invented like the wheel, and not really, right? Because from what I understand, even during that time, there were companies that
Mm,
were kind of working in that fashion. They just didn't have
yeah,
a name for it.
yeah, hmm
Mm,
yeah,
okay, okay,
very
okay.
much so. I mean, and also the technology was increasingly enabling us to move in that direction, right? So, you know, and then when we first got to Amazon, we were still operating on a monolithic code base, and so we had, I think, what it was, a weekly builds and weekly releases, and then that just started ending up being um, yeah, a number of things about the monolithic code base ended up blocking our productivity and our ability to move fast. So web services was, being invented around the same time. I mean, I spent a whole year basically launching no new features and migrating to web services while I was in that particular group. But once that happened, that gave us the autonomy to sort of, launch autonomously whenever we wanted to, and
Mm,
launch quickly, experiment quickly, roll back quickly. A lot of the experimental tools and the metrics were also kind of invented in house. A/B testing, things like kind of precursor to things like Kibana, which allowed us to sort of look at kind of log errors in real time and activity in real time. All those were going on, there and then, and I feel like they really help the whole kind of notion of being metrics driven, being able to measure outcomes, and allows us to validate with numbers to senior management uh, what which direction uh, customers and users are interested in going down. So it really helped us make the case with senior management. This was a good direction to go down.
okay, okay, nice. All right. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about, the time when you were in Amazon, and then, they were more like waterfall-ish, and then, there was that shift to that whole two pizza team model. What was it like? I mean, like, who came up with the idea? Because obviously it's very popularly attributed to Jeff Bezos himself. But yeah, I mean, give us the lowdown on, like, how did that go about? Was it like one day Jeff Bezos just decided to send an email to everyone and go, "Hey, it's going to do pizza time," right? So,
Not at all. From what I remember, I mean, for the longest time, Jeff Bezos was kind of annoyed at um, you know how we slowed down for various reasons, and the infrastructure was just one of them, right? Web services was one of them, but kind of the whole business of the bureaucracy and not being able to sort of be nimble and be autonomous and make decisions, yet being guided by uh, a metric that senior management uh, can bless. So at the beginning of the year, or not at the beginning of the year, it's like usually October. Sort of senior management reviews what everybody wants to build, and they bless more directions and what metric you want to move, as opposed to like, yes, these 5 projects you will launch, kind of thing. And what organization structure will enable that the best? I do remember that Jeff was very caught up with this book, and the name escapes me right now, but There was this book that talked about how you could organize a company to operate more like animals and life and evolution actually operate, where cells, animals, species kind of can evolve in their own kind of different areas, um, as the environment sort of sees fit. And you might have like two different groups of birds or animals evolving exactly the same set of features in different environments, um, or one might do it better than the other, and then that animal or that species that does it better, that wins. And then so he was really kind of thinking about that, and he what he did then was he bought that book for a ton of people, and he sent it out not just to senior management but to anybody he thought, or his management thought, were smart and interesting. And like literally, I saw him once go. There's this junior engineer. He's really smart. He heard him in a meeting. He said, "Give him the book and invite him to the meeting." So he invited a large group of people to his house who had read the book and had this kind of big debate about what does this mean and what we could do with it. And then, as a result of those discussions, not just the big one, but within the senior management team, they came up with the concept of two pizza teams. And then they rolled it out. And they rolled it out broadly. And in my department, our two pizza teams, the only people who were allowed to be non-technical were the designers. So I had a bunch of program managers who weren't necessarily technical, who had to be laid off. And my designation wasn't technical program manager. I was like a group program manager. So I had to lay myself off and have to be rehired by people who were technical. And they were like, "This is ridiculous. Why do we have to do this again? You're just doing the same job, right?" I'm like, "Yes, but." And I asked my boss a little bit later, why did we do that? I mean, I could see that there were some groups, especially more the infrastructure and operations groups, that were just going to not work very well, or shared services kind of groups, not work very well with that model. And eventually they moved back. Uh, but he said, if we'd started out by doing pilot tests, everybody and his uncle would say, "No, my group is special. Can we not do this? Let these other people do it." And we would just never have a really uh,
mm,
strong experiment. Um, so yeah, it was a big, massive change. People were laid off. Some people who I laid off for being non-technical moved to different parts of the company.
mm,
Um, and it was, yeah, I mean, we did operate very differently at that point. That there was less kind of bureaucracy and going up the chain, coming down the chain after that as well.
mm,
Um,
mm,
so I left not too long after kind of AWS was beginning to settle down. The two pizza teams began to settle down. So I'd have to ask some of my friends how things went after that. Um, but it was interesting. And some of the leadership principles that people might be familiar with kind of, came about kind of during that time frame as well, like disagree and commit. Lot of extremely smart, extremely opinionated people, um, and we would see that sometimes people, once a decision had been taken, there would be people who would grouse and like drag their feet if they disagreed. And so basically, the leadership principle was put in place because they on the one hand, they wanted those arguments, they wanted the opinions to come up. That was the time to argue. But once somebody had taken the decision, um, everybody had to, pitch in, so that if the issue failed, as the naysayers said they were going to fail, it would fail because it was a bad idea, as opposed to because these guys bitched and moaned and dragged their feet.
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. I'm very the disagree and commit principle. When I first heard about it, I was like, wow, it's very mind blowing because it it was a very interesting way of working, right? You didn't have to operate by consensus, but everyone was committed. So I still really like that concept. And again, question comes back: was that like a Jeff Bezos thing? Was it somebody in his senior leadership team? Like how did that come about?
Um, that one, I don't necessarily think it was Jeff Bezos, but the senior management team at Amazon, they met every week, and they would discuss things like this culturally. That
Mm,
if things were coming up that um, you know weren't going well or didn't go well, why was it not going well? How might we address it? Um, they didn't come up with these leadership principles all in one go. Each of these things come up, and they're very carefully thought through, and they're very carefully worded, um, and then they're baked into all the kind of your performance management, and they're baked into all the messengers. I mean, like sometimes it feels a little bit when you join Amazon like you're joining a cult because everybody speaks the same language. I remember when at the time we were also experimenting with building other people's websites. So we built Target.com's website. Target is a big nationwide
wow. Yeah, yeah,
department
yeah, yeah.
store.
It was my
Yeah,
favorite place to go when I was in
yeah.
Boston.
So I built their customer reviews, their wish list, their wedding registries, their baby registries, and all the registries were hooked into their in-store like little registration mechanisms as well,
Mm,
right? So I went to Minnesota a couple of times, and they were like, "You guys all talk the same, and it's not that you speak like other Seattleites; it's only Amazon people." Um, so it's pretty funny. They were very effective at sort of baking a lot of these um, common culture and principled phrases into
mm,
how they want us to operate every day. Like I think whenever I went into a Jeff Bezos meeting, he very often would say something customer centric, like the word customer centric was frequently brought up.
mm, mm. Yeah, but I mean, so there's like so much to unpack, and I want to try doing this a little bit, as well, right? Like, I think the first thing that really stood out to me, I think first of all, is in this current day and age, a lot of people always talk about bottoms up stuff and how you start small, blah blah blah. But sometimes you just gotta push it down as well, right? And how you're talking about how, like, look, we really want to change the way we do things, and if it meant just laying off some people, making sure everyone worked in a certain way, you did it. It wouldn't. I don't think it would have worked as well, like you said, if they were to have just discussed about it. And and I think this is really like a true example of how you don't necessarily build by committee, and you don't have to like it, but it's still
No,
gonna happen, right? And I think the second one that, like I said, I'm a big fan of this disagree and commit. And I know there are a lot of people who don't. But I also feel like it's critical, especially as a company gets larger. Actually, no, not even larger. Even small companies have the same problem. Like when you're planning to do something, trying to decide something, it's so important that once that decision is made, it is made, and then everyone, like, it doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on, but everyone has to like roll together. I've personally experienced when few kinds of workarounds to that, right? You have this meeting where all the senior leaders are there, and then everybody has to go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Meeting finishes, and then somebody else goes to this senior person and goes, hey, but I have this thought, and then suddenly 2 days later you're back at the discussion table. I think that's the
yeah, yeah,
worst thing that could happen.
so annoying, and you're having the same damn discussion over again, right?
Exactly, right. So that's why I feel like when you really stick to that principle of, you know what, even if you disagree, just commit. And like you say, right, if it fails, it failed because it was a bad idea, not because people were just dragging their feet because, oh, I don't feel like doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's truly amazing as well, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's so
Yeah.
much to unpack. So much to unpack.
There's
Okay.
two.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would love to hear more, but yeah, I mean, we probably going to move on a little bit as well. I'm gonna literally skip past the Yahoo time, but I just wanted to confirm. At that point in time, when you were there, Marissa Mayer was not there yet, right?
Correct. I think I left almost like just as she was coming on board.
Yes, I looked up your time there
Yeah.
and when Marissa Mayer.
So I
So it's
think
like
Jerry Yang was there, and then
okay,
crap, I forget her name. The lady from Autodesk, um,
okay,
Carol,
okay.
Carol Bartz, and then yeah, she was there for a while. That was an
Wow.
interesting. There was just so much thrash. CEO
Mm,
thrash, general manager thrash. We
mm,
had like an American in charge of our region, and then the Taiwanese were in charge of our region, and then the Indians were in charge of our region, and yeah, it was just painful.
Okay, this was the time. I think at Yahoo, were you still based in the US? No more, right?
Nope, I was here.
Okay, okay, all right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, actually, now that you mentioned, maybe we'll spend a few minutes talking about Yahoo. Right? Like how different was it? Because again, like you said, right, when you went in, it was quite the tumultuous time, and then the
yeah,
whole I, if I remember correctly, the whole reason why they brought Marissa Mayer in was to bring some stability, and bring some some know-how from work.
yeah,
Uh, like how different was it, coming from a culture like Amazon where people literally almost spoke like cultists and everyone even used the same lingo, the same
yeah.
jargon.
Well, they called themselves Yahoos. Um, they had their little cult things as well. That just didn't seem to be clarity on what success meant and how one measured that, and how one would be kind of moving along. The other thing that was interesting was at that point I was now out in the remote areas, and all the decisions were being made in Silicon Valley, right? So
HQ.
how as a product marketing person out here do I convey the needs of my region back to central, and how do they then kind of understand and balance that development, because that was the time, right, um, where lots of people in the US had moved on to Gmail already. People were beginning to move off to Facebook. And here in Southeast Asia, people were still on Yahoo Mail, still on Yahoo Messenger. Maybe not so much in Singapore. A lot of Singapore had already moved on to Microsoft, actually. They were very successful here. But you would go out to Philippines, Vietnam, and they'd be like, "Oh, you work for Yahoo? Can I have your T-shirt?" Like pop stars. But you were beginning to see, if you were in Vietnam and you were doing something on the internet, the person you would talk to was the 13-year-old little boy who kind of knew everything, and he was telling everybody to go to Gmail. So you were beginning to see the writing on the wall, the canary in the coal mine here, and we were trying to
Mm,
tell, hey, this area in the world is still a Yahoo area, a Yahoo stronghold. If there's anything you're going to do, you may want to hold on to this, and this is the growing region.
mm,
Instead, we watched Facebook like go mobile, very effectively mobile first,
yeah.
and very effectively capture the zeitgeist here.
Mm, mm. So for you, do you think you could have done anything differently in your time at Yahoo to kind of like stop the writing on the wall, or do you just feel like, and of course, again, right, in hindsight, everybody has perfect vision, right? But do you think things, if things were done differently, especially from someone on the inside, do you think things would have turned out differently for Yahoo?
Well, me, I don't know what I could have done. I probably, at that point wasn't effective at working my way up this kind of matrix. management system to sort of influence senior management. I think, um, yeah, I think there were just kind of there was just so much kind of bureaucracy out there. And they also felt like they were a big company. They were spending Amazon was always, they always say it's still day one. We were
Yes.
always really frugal. I used to travel to stay, to Vietnam and stay at really nice hotels. I was like, wow, this is nice. And our little offsites. My first day at Yahoo, I managed to join at just the right time. My first day was at a Bali offsite where the entire group went to Bali, and my first one-on-one with my manager was like both of us females were kind of face down on massage tables talking at the frangipani flower through the massage table hole.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Right. So,
So there was just, it did feel to me like, they didn't really understand tech. They were still thinking media. I know, and they just weren't nimble, and they just weren't able to sort of shift not just the tech but the business model.
mm, mm. Yeah, it's quite sad. It's quite sad. My first email was a Yahoo email, which I still use for my bills actually, because I'm too
Yeah,
damn lazy to move it away. And then
yeah,
when we were in uni back in Malaysia as well, like Yahoo Messenger was the big thing. This was before
mhm,
what did Microsoft come up with again? MSN? MSN
yeah,
chat or something,
MSN,
right? Yeah, yeah. So this
yeah,
this was like just before MSN chat as well. So like
yeah,
like I have fond memories of Yahoo, but like you say, right, literally watching it almost wilt away was
yeah,
quite sad, right? But yeah,
yeah,
yeah, writings on the wall. What
yeah.
and
And of
yeah.
course, like weird things like I started, of course, on IRC, and then there
Oh
was
yes,
ICQ, that Israeli company that sort of, managed to be
yes,
the
yes.
right. Remember that one?
Oh
Uh,
yes, I do, I do.
yeah.
Wow, I can actually still remember my ICQ number, by the way.
Really? Wow, I
Yeah,
totally forgotten mine.
41380912.
Wow.
And I have no idea why I still remember it, but yeah, I do.
Yeah. But yeah, lots of different fads. I mean, look, uh, um,
Yeah.
so Yahoo did Yahoo 360, trying to sort of do the social network thing, and it
Yes.
was only popular in Vietnam and Romania.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My Vietnamese clients were so sad when we had to like retire it.
Wow. Like I said, folks, this is literally like walking back in time, like really living life through Nadine's eyes, right?
I
Yeah.
I I also end of life Yahoo auctions in Singapore, by the way.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Okay. Nice. Okay. So let's move on, because actually, what I wanted to also pick your brain a little bit about was after Yahoo, you went through a few companies as well. You even became a CPTO at Parent Inc. And things like that. But I guess the part that I was always very interested to sort of understand was you decided to go back to academia. You joined NUS-ISS, right? For those of
Yeah.
you who don't know, NUS-ISS is the National University of Singapore Institute of System Science. My gosh, that is a mouthful, but yes.
Yeah.
So the question that I wanted to ask you was why?
Okay. So NUS-ISS is interesting. It's not part of the computer science department, and it was formed always to sort of upskill and reskill people in the job market already. It's been around since the 70s, and a lot of senior members in the government, including permsecs and people like that, have actually attended courses at ISS to sort of explain to them what all this IT and technology really is. And so uh, back in one of the startups I was working at, they were sending us interns, and we were giving them feedback saying that you're not really preparing them for the kind of people we need at startup companies. And so they brought us in and said, a bunch of other people too were saying, well, who are giving them the same feedback. And then they asked, well, what are you looking for? We want to sort of create a module to teach full stack development for specifically to assist with startups. And we all said it's mindset change, right? It's
Mm.
don't give them lecture notes. Teach them how to solve problems. Teach them to learn things for themselves and to keep up with technology and to look ahead on technology. And so I'd not developed for a while. So um, other friends of mine and other colleagues helped to build that curriculum, but I stayed involved with them. And in 2018, they wanted to create a digital product strategy class. So they asked me to be an adjunct. So I helped to co-create that class, and I adjuncted that class um, basically through COVID up until earlier this year when I then decided to go full time. Um, and so, why full time and why NUS-ISS? Again, because what they try to do is they try and be as applied and up to date as possible. We use adjuncts a lot because our students all always value kind of not just, hey, let me teach you the theory of how to do this, but what are some of the lessons that um, you know practical experience and failures tell you. Marty Kagan operates in a perfect world. Sometimes you don't operate in a perfect world. What do you do then, right? So we
Wait, what do
like
you
to.
mean sometimes? Most of the time, right?
Yes, exactly. Um, the other the other thing that's really interesting at NUS-ISS is that a lot of government, GovTech, whole of government, NCS, Synapse, like a lot of people there are sending uh, their IT folks and actually some of their non-IT folks through us too, um, because they also have, well, they have some real cutting edge people in the open gov department, but they also have a lot of uh, legacy systems. They have legacy thinking. How do you bring a sprawling government with lots of different silos into a new space where you're thinking product as opposed to project?
Mm.
And so to me, that was a really interesting problem to solve. I've also been asked to create a new master's program for new uh, new engineers. It's going to be called the Master of Science of the Management of Digital Technology. A mouthful. Um, but the three kind of personas are the engineer who's going to become an engineering manager, and there's a lot to learn there. Then there's the product manager who's becoming a group product manager. Sometimes
Mm.
they also end up kind of managing design, and I was at that stage also managing. We had translators.
Mm.
Now I guess that's going to be AI, but other people under us, and then you have people who are more on the business side management, who now have coming in and suddenly they have something technology or technologists in their management portfolio, and like they don't understand their needs and understanding. So
Mm.
while there are a lot of MBA flavored classes out there that teach product management, and there are a lot of kind of masters in technology that really focus on the nuts and bolts of deep tech, this will kind of be somewhere in between, where when you learn about managing people, you learn about managing engineers, product managers, and yeah, we try and I'm trying to talk to. I'll be coming to you with questionnaires and surveys as well to sort of ask you about the different things that I'm evaluating and putting in place.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Happy to help wherever I can. Definitely
Uh,
for sure.
so
Um,
it feels like I'm still doing product management,
mm,
um,
okay.
and I've always loved to mentor, and so this is just felt like a natural extension.
Okay. Okay. But don't okay, so then I guess the part that's curious from my perspective is like, because you started off our chat by saying you like to build stuff, right? And don't you miss that building stuff part of product management? Like,
I'm building a master's program.
okay, okay, yeah, I mean, you're right, I guess. I don't know, yeah, because like for me it, yeah, I don't know, I mean, they say never, but like I cannot imagine myself doing something like that. Like, it to me, it would feel too far removed from, like,
Mm,
building
yeah.
product, so.
Well, I kind of feel like I'm managing um, to have an influence on many different products, and like
Mm,
I solve different product problems as they come through my door, right? Like, you know, that we had a group come in we had a group of traffic police folks coming in, right? They have a very old set of traffic police e-services that they're wanting to upgrade. What's the approach that they want to take? What are the problems they want to solve? What's most important? How can they prioritize those things? We have short courses, but we also have longer courses where um, we go in and do coaching as well. So we do see sort of projects through. And these are
mm,
projects that like I run into daily, right? Like, so for example, the traffic police, they in Singapore, when you turn 65, every 3 years, you got to go get a doctor to certify that you're fit to drive. And you have to go to the traffic police e-service site and upload those 3 pages. And I always have to do it for my dad. And so I'm like, oh my God, what? And so one of the problems that we were looking at was how do we solve this problem and make it so that people like my dad don't have to, you know, spend ages trying to figure it out and try and find someone like a youngster who's willing to help them to do it, right? It's one of
right.
the one, even they went back and looked at sort of all of the things that people call in to the help desk for, and this was one of the big ones, right?
Mm, mm,
So solving problems like that, I feel like they're very tangible.
yeah. So now you're almost doing the reverse. Now you're living vicariously through the people that you coach, right? So, and the
Yeah,
people that you mentor as well. So
yeah.
yeah, okay. And by the way, when you talk about your dad having the difficulty, having to go to the police and having to do all this online and things like that, like, you should try the Malaysian government websites. It makes you
Oh,
have a whole new appreciation for whatever you have in Singapore.
oh, dude. I mean, at the Parent Inc., most of my team was in India, so I used to have to fly there. And I remember trying to apply for like a business visa, and the error message was didn't
Technical error messages that made no sense to the
made no
non.
sense whatsoever. So I, viewed the code and I found the regular expression and I figured out what they were looking for. And so I modified what I put in. I'm like, it was an easy fix. You just needed to change, just even like the error message would have helped.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Yeah, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff that, I mean, you're doing, for lack of a better word, you're doing God's work. Especially when you talk about like trying to fix, stuff in the government, and we all know how painful that is. And I think tagging along that line, right? The question that I wanted to ask you, now you being in academia, is, do you feel like it's time for product, not just like product management, but in terms of like, digital product, is that something that we kind of need to start formalizing a little bit more, right? So example I always like to use is, like, engineering have this board of engineers, and literally that gives you, like, like, if you pass, you're literally legit, right? And people
Mm,
know, okay, you are not someone who flunked out of school and bluff your way through,
right.
but you are someone. And we don't have that for product management specifically, but also in the wider scope of like product development world.
Mm.
Do you think that that's something that, as we look to the future, that's going to be more and more important, or no need for that?
Um, I do think, I mean, there are product schools that have arisen, that are doing, a good job in each of their spaces. I mean, we at ISS, we're trying to sort of solve the problems that sort of specific to what we try to solve the problems of. Singapore Computer Science Society has also just started like a product management SIG after many, many years. So I do think these kind of formal routes are important. But the question of, you know, who will someone win in the certification space? I mean,
Mm,
people are people are offering certificates, but there is currently no consensus about uh, what is the approach, what is the best approach, what is the right school, what is the right flavor.
yeah,
Part of the problem of product management is there's so many flavors of product management, and things sort of shift so much over time, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I'm definitely a huge advocate of, as we talked about in KL, those of us who have been around in the field, kind of um, being in contact with one another and trying to differentiate and figure out, yeah, what is it that sort of is needed in our arena, in
mm,
our part of the world,
yeah,
um, that's perhaps different than some of what kind of the Western online resources have available, and what can we, do ourselves to solve our own problems, come up with
yeah,
our own frameworks, if you will.
mm,
One of the
mm,
things I was wondering in 2007 when I came back from the US, I was like, "Where's the tech here? Like, what are they doing?" And a lot of us were very young in the field at the time. Those of us in tech had, not had much life experience or industry experience. And so a lot of the things that we were coming up with were very me too. And then at the same time, the stuff that our region is good at, Singapore specifically, government, finance,
yeah,
they were not embracing kind of real, let's advance, let's be on the forefront of things. And I said, when these two sets of people, and this set of people grows up, and these people like realize that digital is something important, and they come together, um, this is where we're going to begin to uh, build things that are innovative, that are part of the world or our
mm,
own society. Um, we'll begin to lead. You know.
mm, mm. I mean, okay, so yeah, since you're dangling that carrot, I'll bite, right? So like, do do you think that Asia becomes like in the I mean, I don't know how long into the future I'm projecting, right? But do you think that Asia becomes like a reference point in the future? And the reason why I'm saying this, right, is again, I've spoken to a lot of people, and maybe my conclusion is wrong because my sample size is not big enough or something. But everyone I know who has come to this part of the world always says that the way that we build, the way that product works, product development, technology, digital is very different from a lot of the other parts of the world. And I think maybe we share a bit of similarity with Africa as well in terms of how we kind of skipped through some of the stages and we like just jumped straight into mobile and data and cheap data and things like that. So like do you think that at some point people are going to start looking towards how companies in Asia have made it big and sort of try to understand like, yeah, this is how you would build if it wasn't a homogeneous society, or
Yes.
it's very different.
Exactly. I mean, look at Grab and how it won, right? It managed to localize much more nimbly. It managed to sort of handle working with very different cultures, very different legal environments and government environments much more deftly than Uber did, for example, right?
Mm, mm. Yeah, and how do you see, and so sorry, going down that rabbit hole, how do you see sorry, that's a very leading question. Let me rephrase that question. Do you think academia will be a big part of that push, or do you think that that's something that's going to happen with or without this formalized way of teaching other people to solve problems?
Um, I think formalized frameworks can be really helpful shortcuts. I know, especially when your head's down and you're really busy, you don't take the time to keep up to date with what's going on right now, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you just go and spend 3 days learning something from someone. A lot of people have taken my class. I'm like, hey, I know you. You're a product manager. Why are you here? And they're like, well, I feel like I've learned in the trenches, and I feel like there are gaps that I don't know that I don't know.
Mm,
And it is true. I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's true. You're a very kind of a product marketing kind of a person. You probably want to learn a little bit more on the deployment and iteration and prioritization side of the things. And then I get a lot of people who came from very, very technical product managers who kind of don't know very much on the viability side of things. So filling in a lot of blanks to sort of, especially when they're growing and maturing, um, and becoming exactly what I'm building a master's for, right? Filling in a
mm.
lot of blanks.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And also I think the part where you say, like, if you come from this particular flavor, right? It's not necessarily a background, but like you said, product have different flavors, whether you're product marketing, you're like technical product manager and things like that. It does sound like, especially now in the last 2 years where we've seen this funding winter and lots of layoffs, and it's not just layoffs, right? There are a lot of companies who are deciding to stay lean as well. It does look and sound like the future of product management, at least in this part of the world, right? It is moving towards where you really need to know broad broad strokes of, it's
Yeah,
no longer, oh, I'm just going to go deep into one area and then I'm going to stay there, right? It really
yeah,
does sound like, the broader your horizons are, the better it is for you in the long term.
yeah. Uh, yeah, really kind of understanding more about what kind of the breadth of operations is. But I think very importantly, whatever it is you're doing, really being able to sort of understand the value impact you bring to the business is how you can measure it and then articulate that to the business owner is very important. So, for
Mm,
example, in my previous company, going into sort of looking at the technical debt, um, we organized it with a product mindset to it. First of all, we like figured out we organized it and categorized it in ways that made sense, and then we calculated what was most urgent, most important, and what was the business impact. And then when we calculated that, we could make the case for, well, we need to take the time, this amount of time to solve this amount of technical debt in return for this benefit, right? If you
mm,
can't if you can't articulate those things, even as a technical product manager, you're going to face problems in a
mm,
world, especially like this one, where uh, people people are going to look for reasons to lay you off, and you're going to have to sort of be able to say, well, why is it important that I'm doing what I'm doing, and what the impact
mm,
to the business is.
mm. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I really like that as well, right? If you can't quantify it, if you can't qualify it, you're gonna be in trouble, no matter whether it's the depth or the breadth that you're trying to solve.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm,
You go back to the fundamental questions like, what are you trying to solve? Who are you trying to solve it for? How are you going to measure it? And then how are you going to communicate and persuade?
yeah. Yeah. And I guess coming back full circle now, right? Because you were saying that you went through the dot-com boom, you went through financial crisis, and then now there's this funding winter post COVID normalization or whatever you want to call it, right? Do you think then that this will pass and then we'll go back to, crazy hiring and, crazy funding, and then, cycle again? Like, where do you think we're headed in terms of, you know product?
Yes, I mean, I do think empires rise and fall. But what shape that will look like in the future is still TBD.
Mm,
Do we have, instead of like, product managers are important, are we now broken down into, I need product marketers, but my designers can do all the kind of the user stuff. I mean, fundamentally, um, the set of things that we do as product managers need to be done by someone, and not everything needs to be done all at once. Different things need to be done in different stages of a company. Different things need to be done by different kinds of product. But
mm,
the bottom line is, do you really know what problem you're trying to solve, for whom, how do you measure that, how do you iterate and make sure that's going on, continuing to sort of bring value? Are you really doing a good job of measuring the three circles: desirability, feasibility, viability? Those things all need to be done, right? Do they all need to be done by someone called a product manager? I don't
mm,
know. Uh, um, but I don't think product management is 100% going away.
mm.
But people are still going to always be asking, what the hell is a product manager and what do you do? Because there's so many different flavors of us out there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's one of the, I think it's one of the beautiful things about product management, because like it's such a varied flavor, right? This company does it this way, that company does it this way. And yet at the same time, right, it's also the thing that kind of, I don't know, stops us from being even more widespread, I guess, if that's the right word.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things that sort of at NUS-ISS we're looking at is, government was sending a lot of people to us for PM training, but then we were sending people back into these organizations that had no context, right? So actually, one of the things that I think we have found really important is to kind of train the rest of the organization. What is a well functioning product team,
Mm,
and what is, making sure that sort of the business leaders, the CIOs, kind of really understand what what we're trying to do with this, and what does this mean in terms of the organization and the change management involved in changing the culture as well. So it's
yeah.
not just changing. Part of our problem is that we know what product managers do, but a lot of other people don't, and maybe we need to tell other people what product managers do.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I was just having this kind of like online conversation with another group as well. I think part of the determining factor of whether your role as a product manager is successful or not is also dependent on whether your company kind of knows what you're supposed to be doing, right? Because if people feel like, oh, hey, a product manager is a project manager, then yeah, you're gonna be suffering in some way, shape, or form. And if their idea of product manager means, hey, you just take whatever I tell you and you just execute, then again, you're gonna have a different flavor of problems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a course called the Product Thinking Organization. So we send a lot of non-product managers through that course, right?
Mm, yeah, I agree.
So
Yeah,
where
sometimes.
they explicitly learn, like, this is project, this is product.
Yeah.
These are the three circles, and this is what we try and do, and this is why we want to work in iterative ways, and this is the value add we bring to the table, and this is how it needs to be measured.
Mm,
So yeah, you know, we don't work well in isolation, because we sit in the middle of this Venn diagram. If everybody else doesn't know what the hell you're doing, then you're never going to get alignment.
yeah, I agree. And that's where I think it's always interesting, because in that intersection of that diagram, you are inevitably going to be pulled more in one direction than the other two. And that's what I think brings the variety to the flavor of product management, right? In certain
Hmm.
companies, you're going to have to be a lot more business minded, because that's where it's lacking. And in some places, the business side is really strong, but the
Yes.
viability, the feasibility part is not so strong. So then you got to like go figure out, how can I teach people, or how can I guide the team members to sort of think like, no, you don't have to build everything. You can always build a little bit first, like a thin slice, and then work
Yeah,
your way and understand. So
exactly.
yeah, I like that.
I like the guy who did the PM Daisy, pmdaisy.com. Go fill it in and see what your PM Daisy looks like. Which,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, and it's changed for I'm sure it's changed for you every company you've been to, and sometimes even different departments within the same company.
Yeah.
You're as a product manager, I'm like I'm doing something you know skewed very differently from sort of what I was doing when I was called the same thing.
Mm-hmm,
So that's
mm-hmm.
why, like, when my parents ask me, "What are you doing now?" I thought are you still a product manager?
I until today, my parents just stopped trying to ask me. Right, it's like this. You just do some tech stuff, and then every now and then I just send them like, yeah, this is what I did. Like this is what my company does. This is what my team came up with, and then yeah, we'll leave
Yeah,
it at
yeah,
that. So
yeah.
very nice, very nice. Okay, Nadine. Nadine, I would love to take this on for longer, but I think we need to come to a close for this
Yep,
session.
yep.
Thank you so much. Like I really enjoyed you telling the stories of your time in Amazon, in Yahoo, and even what you're doing now in NUS-ISS. Really cool stuff. I'm really hoping to see what you come up with for that master's program. Who knows? You might see me sitting there one day. And go, hey, I know you. You're a product guy. So yeah. But just before we go, right? Is there like any is there a last thought? Is there something you want to leave with our viewers and our listeners? Yeah, anything you want to say
Yeah,
before we
I
go?
mean, we already kind of went over it, just which is basically know what value you're adding to the organization, whatever you're working on. If you don't know what value you're bringing and you can't measure it and you can't communicate it, you're in a danger zone. So know what value you're adding and learn how to communicate it. And the other thing is, do try to connect and I'd love to hear from people about what's going on with product management in your space, and I'm especially excited to have come to FuseCon in KL, and would love to stay connected with people who've been around the block in Southeast Asia, and learn from each other as well, because there are definitely things that we bring to the table for our region that I'd love us to, like what you're doing with your podcast, really share, and not just share amongst to the benefit of the other product managers here, but to sort of non-product managers too.
Nice. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Nadine Yap, the principal lecturer and consultant at NUS-ISS, someone who has had so much experience in the product world. I do have to give a shout out to Sylvia as well. So, Sylvia, if you all remember, she was, I think, guest number 3. She used to be like the CTO and SVP of product at Zalora. It was actually, I got to know Nadine through her. And I think I'm still amazed until today how I have not heard about Nadine until like just a few months ago. Like this is probably the best kept secret this part of the world. Yeah, and I feel like every time I speak to Nadine, I'm learning so much more, because I'm not just learning about theory but also learning from her own experience. And I think it's great that she's decided to dedicate her life well, this part of her life to academia, to really help other people understand how things work. So thank you so much, Nadine, for coming
Absolutely,
into
my
the
pleasure.
show.
It was fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I think for everyone else, I think it's very important that you continue to really understand what you do, why you do, and like Nadine was saying, right? Quantify, qualify it, and make sure you're bringing value to the organization, because ultimately it's less about the role or the title and more about, hey, is this person valuable enough that we need to keep? So it may not be now, it may not be next year, it could be the next cycle. We don't know what flavor it would take. But yeah, I think we need to continue to strive to better ourselves, and also to like we were discussing just now, right? How do you bring value to the table? Thank you all so much for listening until this far, if you have. And yeah, I'll see you at the next episode. Thank you all so much, and bye bye.